Hi, my name is Shantae, and I am a student at Liberty University pursuing my doctorate of education. I have a passion for the learning sciences, and I wanted to share something with you that I have found really interesting, and that is the magic of multimedia mind maps and how they can improve higher order thinking skills. But first, I have a magic trick for you. You ready? I'm not going to guess which card you have from my deck of cards. I am going to guess, however, which slide you choose from my slide deck. So here we go. Are you ready? All right. A. If you needed to learn the parts of a jellyfish, would you prefer slide A or slide B? Okay, hang in there. Hold on. The magic trick's not over yet. Just to prove how magical I am, I have one more for you. If you needed to learn the cardiac cycle and how the heart pumps blood, and let's say you had no previous experience with this information, would you rather read about it here with this text, or would you prefer slide B with a video? So I'm going to play just a little bit of the video for you. So then you can decide.
The normal heart has two sides, a right side and a left side, and four chambers. The top receiving chambers, or atrium, and the lower chambers, which are thick-walled pumping chambers, called the ventricles. Red blood cell will come from either the superior vena cava or the inferior vena cava and enter into the right atrium. The blood then flows across the tricuspid valve to the right ventricle. The right ventricle then squeezes and ejects that blood cell into a vessel called the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery splits into two vessels, each going to the lungs. As that red blood cell makes its way through the lung, it returns through the pulmonary veins to the left atrium. That blood is now oxygenated. It's picked up oxygen, then goes across the mitral valve into the left ventricle, which does most of the work in terms of delivery of blood flow to the body. That blood cell is now ejected into the aorta to some organ or muscle or skin in the human body.
Okay, that was 1 minute. Would you prefer that or this? Right? So A or B. Now, here comes the magic. I am going to guess. No, I know that you chose B on both options. Is that right? Did I do it? Are you impressed? Ta-da! If I am right, which I'm guessing that that I'm not sure what my percentage would be. What, 99%? Then your brain functions pretty much like the rest of ours. And I know what you're saying. Yeah, it's a no-brainer, Shantae. It's just instinct, right? That's just how our brains work. And I already knew this. Right? Like, obviously, I would prefer to learn about a jellyfish while also seeing a picture of a jellyfish. It feels like no-brainer. So, no, it's not really magic, right? Is it? Or maybe it feels more like magic until we totally understand it, which, thankfully, we understand it a lot more thanks to some research. And it is called the multimedia principle. People learn more deeply from words and pictures than from words alone. And I think because we naturally understand that we learn more deeply from words and pictures than from words alone, then we naturally prefer it, right? Because our brain knows what will help it to learn more. And we understand these things not just because it's our instinct and it's a no-brainer, but we thankfully have a lot of research around this now, and that is thanks in large part to Dr. Richard Mayer, who is an educational psychologist currently at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and he's authored these books and dozens and dozens of research studies over the course of several, 2-3 decades, maybe even, who he's renowned. He's just leading the charge when it comes to the study of multimedia learning. So the study of how do words and pictures help us to learn. And essentially that's what we mean by multimedia. Is text can be either printed words or audio. Like, so the words you're actually hearing me speak right now count in that first category. And then there are visuals. So the combination of the text words plus a visual. Now the visual can be what you've seen already in our jellyfish example, a photograph of a jellyfish. And you see even the photograph was paired with words. So that already was multimedia. And the video, so just the visual part of the video, what you were seeing, the animation of the heart, that was the visual part. But then you also heard audio, so that was the words. So again, that was a complete package of multimedia as well. But I'm just trying to point out what was the visual aspect of it. And then there's this figure 8 chart type thing that counts as a visual. Sketches, icons, anything drawn, charts, graphs, basically anything that your eye can take in that's not text would count as a visual. And it's when you combine both of these, the text, words, and visuals, that you get when you combine them for the purpose of learning, teaching, educating, then you get multimedia learning. And so that's what we're talking about just by way of definition. And the combination of these can be magical. And in the science of learning terms, it helps students these two things combined help students to maximize their cognitive load. Now, I love this diagram from dreamymusings.com, but I thought it showed, it was a good multimedia piece that explained cognitive load pretty simply. But essentially, cognitive load is how much work is it for us to process and compute and categorize and organize and move information to our long-term memory. So how much effort is it to get that new information in through our working memory? That is cognitive load. And there are 3 different types of cognitive load, and we need to do different things with them. So like intrinsic cognitive load, this essentially means like the complexity of new information, and that we need to simplify. And extraneous cognitive load is this information that's coming in through our eyes and our ears it's just distracting, and we need to reduce it so that we can use more of our working memory power. Like, so if we only have 100%, we want to use most of that, if possible, on the germane cognitive load, which is deep processing of new information by integrating it with previous learning. So we want to maximize germane cognitive load. And multimedia can do these things. It can help us simplify complexity. It can reduce extraneous cognitive load, reduce distractions, and help us to maximize focusing on the right information. So multimedia helps students' brains focus and consume information more efficiently. Now, one of my favorite multimedia strategies, especially one that I've learned recently, is mind mapping. Have you seen anything that looks like this before? How about this one? Notice this one is more written, the hand-drawn, right, with color. This one is digitally created. Here's something else with a combination of pictures, colors, lines, text. Here's one that my son brought home from kindergarten. His teacher calls these webs, but it's the same thing. It's a mind map. And I was so excited when I saw it because I did not do any mind maps in my K through 12 education. But he's already doing it, so I'm happy that this concept has already hit the public school system, at least where my son is studying. So he's ahead of the game in terms of applying this concept already. So as you can see, just as you're looking at all of these, like no two mind maps look the same, right? And there doesn't seem to be any like specific formatting rules. And there's not. There are just a few key concepts. So let's take this mind map just as an example. Making a presentation. So if you were preparing to give a presentation in a few weeks and you wanted to make sure you didn't forget anything about it and you wanted to make sure you were thinking about everything, you could create a mind map. And if so, you could follow the basic steps of number 1, write a central theme or topic in the middle. And number 2, connect related ideas with connecting lines. So what about making a presentation do we need to think about? You know, the visuals, topic, audience, delivery, location. Then step 3 is where you take each of those subtopics, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 around the circle, and you think through each one of those and think about what are the subordinate subtopics of those. So like, let's take location, for example, down at the bottom. What would be the tech, the room, the food that you need to think about for that presentation? And is there anything you need to coordinate with any of those? Is there anything you need to learn about the room? Or is there anything you need to plan for the food? So, and that can help you feel confident. Okay, I've thought about the location. I might even add parking. That's always a big one, especially if you're in a new location. So, so those are basically the basic steps of creating a mind map. Oh, and you can notice you can go even further. So those subordinate tasks or thoughts can have their own little branches, right? So it just keeps growing. In a way, it can kind of be like a tree. So that's essentially the general concepts, those 3. And a bonus general concept for creating mind maps is to use single words or simple phrases. Just because the idea is to keep it simple. And keep it visual as much as possible so that your brain, can process it easier. You can also, the ideas can be expressed with colors, pictures, symbols, or keywords. So that's basically the framework of how you create a mind map. And again, as you can see, that you can format them however you want. Now, you'll be happy to hear this. You can also call them whatever you want. Here are some names that I've come across for mind maps. Visual thinking tool, graphic note-taking, word painting, webs. That's what my son's kindergarten teacher calls them. Visual outline. That's my addition. I think it's pretty good. I'm sure someone has already thought of that. Spider diagrams, spray diagrams. Or there is a name that Tony Buzan came up with that I don't think any of these can even compete with. This is what he calls it. The most powerful thinking tool in the universe. Dun, dun, dun. So who is Tony Buzan? Tony Buzan was a British psychologist and educational consultant focused on improving memory. And he... I don't think anybody invented the mind map, but he essentially popularized it, inspired by concept maps and even thoughts by Leonardo da Vinci. And he said, hey, there is something here that we need to tap into for education. And so he popularized it in the 1970s. And so we have him to thank. Thank you, Tony Buzan, for the mind maps. And as he suspected, and as we know now, mind mapping is a tool that helps unlock the brain's potential. So it stimulates the radial structure of the brain's neural network, and it activates the whole brain. So it activates the left brain, or the left hemisphere, through developing logical thinking and grouping skills. And mind mapping also activates the right hemisphere by emphasizing spatial and visual language. So it combines both of them in a single tool. Whereas, can you imagine like note-taking? Note-taking would just basically what? Activate the left hemisphere, right? Now, some researchers say that it is essentially the thinking process becoming visual. And I love that definition because it uses the word thinking. Now, that's what it's all about, right? In education, we want our students to think. We want them to think more, not just be passive listeners and sit back and have information go in one ear and out the other or over their heads. And we don't want them to just parrot it back. So even if the information does land in their head somewhere, the goal of education is not just, I say 1, 2, 3, you say 1, 2, 3. We actually want them to understand the concepts of like, what is 1, 2, 3? What can I do with those numbers? And really think about that. And not only think, but then analyze it and evaluate it and that new information, and then eventually create something with it. Now, there is a name for this as well in the learning sciences, and it's called Bloom's taxonomy. You may have heard of this. We have Benjamin Bloom and his team of educational psychologists in the 1950s to thank for this. So this concept has been around for quite a long time. It was updated in 2001 by a team, let me get their names right here, Anderson and Krathwohl in 2001. And one of those researchers was actually part of that original team, or one of the students of Benjamin Bloom, I believe, who then he updated it and tweaked it a little bit in 2001. So that's basically what we use now today. That's what you're seeing here on the screen. It's essentially the revised Bloom's taxonomy. But what is that? What is this triangle that we're seeing? It is a classic model for curriculum design that was created, as I told you, by this team in the 1950s. And it represents essentially a classification process for different learning objectives that educators may set for students. And it's hierarchical, if I'm saying that right, where it's intended to basically move from the bottom to the top, and not every educational activity or event is meant to get students from the bottom to the top. Maybe the goal is to essentially, I just want my students to remember this piece of information. Okay, then you design the educational experience around just remembering. But say you want them to be able to apply it. Then using Bloom's taxonomy, that it's helpful if you can, number one, help the students remember the information, and then take them up a level, help them understand it, and then take them up a level cognitively. This is a cognitive map. Help them apply it. That's how we can use this. And then you stop there, right? Okay, so I've accomplished the educational objectives of this curriculum. So as you can see, there are 6 levels, and the ones here at the top are called higher order thinking skills. Because again, that's what we want our students to do. We want them to think, right? And this is what education's all about. And a goal of effective instruction involves moving students from the lower levels of the taxonomy to the higher levels. And that is the challenge of education, right? So back to Dr. Richard Mayer, he said, how do we get people to engage in the processing that we want them to engage in, given that they have very limited capacity for processing? Remember we studied about cognitive load? Short-term memory or short-term processing is very limited. So how do we work with limited cognitive load processing to get students from remember to create? That's essentially what he's saying. And I mean, that's the challenge of education. That's the goal of education. And that's the question for educators. So what's the answer? Well, there are lots and lots and lots of answers, as I'm sure you already know. However, there is a growing body of research that supports that multimedia mind mapping could help students achieve competencies that lead to higher order thinking. So mind maps. I'm suggesting that mind maps could be used as a tool, a multimedia tool to get students to the top of the triangle. Now, there is a growing body of research that supports this, as I mentioned, and I'm going to just reference 7 of them briefly, but I will also add references to more at the end of this presentation, along with all of the complete reference list for everything that I've been citing so far in this presentation, and then these as well. But Polat and Iden in 2020 found that preschoolers who created mind maps individually or in groups improved in critical thinking abilities significantly greater than those in the control group. I found that piece of information, that word significantly, significant. And they actually found that for that age group, the preschoolers, that working in the groups to create the mind maps was even more effective than creating mind maps individually. It would be interesting to see if that applies across the spectrum of different ages, or like do adult learners work better individually in creating mind maps? Does do individual and group mind mapping still create the same levels of critical thinking, abilities in students? Some other researchers, so Fad et al. In 2017, found that 7th grade science students who created mind maps showed the highest scores in critical thinking tests. And that was compared to students, other science students who did not create mind maps. And then Wu in 2020 studied nursing students, because nursing students and nurses need to have critical thinking, independent thinking skills where they can analyze and evaluate situations and make the best decisions based on the information that they have, because no two situations are exactly the same in nursing. So they thought if anybody needs critical thinking skills, it's nursing students. And so they trained them in mind mapping techniques. And they found that those students that they trained, or whom they trained, increased critical thinking inclination significantly. There's that word again. Israel et al. In 2020, they also took mind maps to the medical student field and studied physician assistants students who they used mind mapping, showed significant difference in higher critical thinking scores than the note-taking group. So this one, instead of just a control group that did nothing, they compared it to note-takers. Now, you imagine, students who get into PA school, they know how to study. They know how to consume information, right? So these students who already know all of that could up their game even more beyond the skill set that they already had for consuming large amounts of information by using mind maps. That's powerful stuff, right? So critical thinking, there are many good definitions of it. I love this one. What is critical thinking, which is, the theme among all of these? It is the ability to analyze facts, generate and organize ideas, defend opinions, make comparisons, draw inferences, evaluate arguments, and solve problems. Whew, what a list of critical thinking. That's a tall order. But you just pull out those two words, analyze and evaluate. Critical thinking plugs right into those, the top level 2 and 3, towards the top of Bloom's taxonomy. So we can see that mind maps improve critical thinking, which is up there at the top of Bloom's taxonomy, which is where we want our students to be. But it's not quite the top, is it? Because we want them to then be able to do what? Create something new, produce new original work with this information, ideally. And so there is also a growing body of research around creativity. So mind mapping can help with that too. Now, here's just three studies that I've read recently. Zhu and Lee in 2021 found that mind maps effectively helped university design students develop creative ideas, stimulate their minds, and maintain their creative energy. And these researchers were able to connect the quality of the students' mind maps with the quality of their final designs, and they found that they were directly correlated, and that this tool helps these students be more creative. Djohan et al. In 2022 found something similar, that it increased creativity. So creating self-assessment mind maps had a significant impact on elementary students' self-efficacy and creativity. So the students had a perception of themselves that as creative agents that increased. So many people today, and it's sad, the older we get, the less creative we feel or think we are. If you create a mind map, however, at least according to this study, you might feel more creative. So at least it worked for these elementary school students. Pollat in 2021. This is the same researcher who studied the preschoolers' critical thinking skills with mind maps. He came back a few years later, I'm sure with different populations of preschoolers, but he did study preschoolers again, and he found that, or this researcher, Pollat, found that the preschoolers who created mind maps progressed further in their creativity than those who did not. So it worked. Mind maps helped preschoolers become more creative and to think more critically. So that's quite a bit of and there's far more. That's just a highlight of the type of research that's out there around creativity. Now, what is creativity? It's the desire and ability to use one's imagination, insight, intelligence, feeling, and emotion to transfer an idea from one state to another previously unexplored state. That's the goal. That's what we all want to be able to achieve with the information that we're consuming. We want to be able to do something with it, create something new in our own lives and in our communities and the world around us for our families. And it's just fascinating to me that there's such a simple tool with so many different names and so many different formats and very few guidelines can do so much. To me, that's power. And essentially, mind maps can help students see new connections and then generate new ideas and unique insights as a result. And so that's how mind maps can help students get to the top of the triangle in Bloom's taxonomy. So in conclusion, these are my 3 takeaways for you as a wrap up and a summary of what we've talked about. If you remember nothing more from this presentation, just remember these 3 things. Number 1, multimedia, which means words plus visuals, helps people learn. 2, mind mapping is a researched multimedia strategy that can improve critical thinking and creativity. And 3, one goal of learning is to help our students climb the Bloom's taxonomy triangle to think more critically and create. And mind mapping can take them there. And so while, this is how I would summarize all of it. use mind mapping more. So challenge yourself to try it out in your own life. Whenever you want to think more deeply about anything, plan something, organize your thoughts around something, or brainstorm ideas for something, try it and then teach it. Pass it along and try group mind mapping as well. So build a mind map together, especially with young children, because, again, it's proven that they benefit more from group mind mapping, especially. But try it with others as well, and see, anecdotally, if group mind mapping or individual mind mapping is more effective in your own life. Now, as we continue to learn more, water this and add more sunshine to this concept in educational psychology and cognitive, the neuroscience, then we will learn more about it. And a few things one thing especially that I think would be interesting to study is it just as effective to look at a mind map that's already created as it is to create one yourself? And then also you could compare that to watching someone else create one. So say a teacher, and then compare that to a group. So, how much does the personal involvement in the creation of the mind map affect the results on the critical thinking and creativity outcomes of that mind map? So there's still more to learn. There's a lot to learn, and that's why we call it a growing body of research. We don't rely just on one or two studies. We rely on the body of it. And what is this general structure telling us as we add a few more parts here and there, little pieces, puzzle pieces to this picture that's forming. But I'll tell you, we do know enough right now to at least know that mind maps are worth our time exploring and applying when appropriate in educational settings. And so that's my challenge to you. And when it works, to help your students think through an idea, analyze it, evaluate it, and maybe even create something new with it, then you can say, it's magic. Thank you.